Hello friends, welcome to episode 140 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I'm full.
Oh, yes.
I didn't want to finish the burrito, but I wanted to finish the burrito.
In Soviet Russia, burritos finishes you.
It's true. It's true. Oh my god, it was so good, though. So it was so good. So good.
Well, I mean, to be fair, though, you bought, like, what, the big damn
Literally,
burrito,
it
or
was
whatever,
called, like, the Big Amigo or something like that. I haven't had one in a long time, and it was good. It was good.
Dinner was definitely good.
It was worth it. It was worth it. But it's like, if you get the small one, you still get the beans and rice with it, and this, they just put it inside. They're like, screw that. We're just going to do it all.
Put everything in there.
Just put it all in, call it a burrito. So, anywho...
You
had a game.
I had a game.
You had a game session.
Last weekend.
You did?
And I'm going to be straight up with you, man. It was one of the best damn game sessions I've ever run in my entire life. But I suppose that's what happens when you have 3 months to plan it because your game keeps getting canceled.
I don't think that's true, but I think you planned it well.
Knowing the number of revisions that plot went through, because it was like, well, I guess it's not going to be for another month. Time to look at my notes again and see what I can fix, see what I can refine.
Crap.
Yeah, and I did that a couple times. Where, like, I looked at my things and I was like, why am I just going, why does this plot lack nuance?
Mm-hmm.
What could I throw in here? Oh, yeah, the flower shop idea, something that came in December.
No, simple. I like it. It was nice.
Things like that. So, for you Skyrim and Elder Scrolls fans out there, the plot we're kind of following is my twist on the whole Meridia's beacon thing. Rob's character picked up the beacon. He's kind of the group's cleric, I suppose, of Stendar.
Yes.
And so he found this beacon, and he's like, I don't know if I want to get in bed with a Daedra. That sounds dangerous, but we'll hear her out.
Yep.
And she was like, why don't you go into town? There's a darkness brewing there. And he's like, what kind of darkness? And she's like, you know what?
It's vile.
Don't know.
It's just vile.
Can't tell you. I've got some eyes and ears there, but nobody really knows what's going on, and I'm barred off from Tamriel, so I don't know. I can't see in there.
Right.
But you are my mortal agent. Why don't you go in there and check it out for me?
Yeah. It's a really nice way of saying what she said. That's funny.
Bought a flower at a flower shop, which gave him a lead to go and meet at a mansion at 8 p.m. And he was like, what's going on with this? It was a cult meeting.
It was always a cult.
Masks and robes and everything.
It's a Daedra. Of course there's a cult.
They gave him a sword.
Yeah,
They gave him the Dawnbreaker.
Yeah, big honking sword.
And then we've figured out that there are vampires in the sewers.
Yes. Yes, there are vampires in the sewers, and that may be the vileness that is going on in the city.
Probably the vileness
Most likely. She don't like undead.
Yeah.
She don't like...
Really hates undead.
Yeah.
So if there's vampires in the sewers, chances are that's it.
Yeah. So, what worked? What made it work, in your opinion, as a storyteller?
So I think what I really liked is that everybody kind of had buy-in to the mystery element.
Yes.
And everybody was really proactive about it, which is what I was really hoping for, because I kind of told everybody from the get-go that this is your plot. Like, I'm going to be handing plot to you. That's it. Like, and everybody else took that as a cue to, let's help our friend Theodane, and not as, Theodane's the only person involved, let's sit on our thumbs.
Yeah. It wasn't a personal history plot so much as it was, this is just wrapped around this character a little bit.
Yes. And so everybody was very proactive about trying to figure out what the darkness in the city was and some of that. You kind of split the party, and everybody was really patient with everybody else while they were doing their own investigations and whatnot. That worked really well. It worked really well that you leaned into the hard moves that I made.
Yes.
So, when I gave you the lead to go to the apothecary shop, you took it.
Yeah.
You role-played that scene. When I then gave you the note, the receipt for your purchase, that had the meeting location written on it, you were like, okay, I guess I'm going to this meeting. And then when your door got kicked down by the Thieves Guild demanding to know where your missing person is, because you were the last person seen with them, you didn't turn it into a combat encounter, and that was my big, I'm going to hold my breath and make this hard move, you know?
And I think what works for me in regards to that, just to say something to that, is that I'm playing my character as a wise old person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like D&D levels don't make sense for that.
Yeah,
because it's a matter of who you are and how skilled you are at what you've done, and he's basically just deals with things like somebody's going to kick down your door. There's only two ways that goes: either they're coming in and murdering you in your sleep, in which you try not to get murdered, or B, there's a conversation to be had. And if there's a conversation to be had, you just wait.
You just let the conversation.
You let the conversation happen.
But for me, like I saw that going one of two ways in my head, and I don't think it was going to be you. I didn't think it was going to be you going, I'm going to instigate a combat situation here.
Right.
That's why, like, the first thing I did was ask, okay, who was rooming with you?
Right.
Because I figured it was either going to be Tristan or Rhaegar.
Right.
There would be the warrior or the fire mage.
Right.
It turned out it was the fire mage this time around, who's a real chill individual.
Pretty much, yeah.
But if it were Rhaegar, the Nord warrior, things were going to get spicy in there.
I think it would have turned out much more like one of the Driver movies, where, like, two big guys in a tiny room bashing into each other, taking out other people.
Yes, yes. But yeah, it turned out real chill, and I was a little worried that everybody else at the table was going to be like, oh, do I hear the door get kicked in? Okay, roll for initiative. You know, I want to get in there. I want to fight somebody. That didn't happen. In fact, I was talking to Sean about it afterwards, and he was like, yeah, I thought it was kind of funny how nobody else, like, even jumped up to your defense. We all heard the door kicked in, and we were just like, well, thoughts and prayers. So...
Totally true.
Totally true. I thought that was just great. In kind of a stroke of brilliance, the last thing that worked out was the group collectively picked up on the clues I had dropped. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but, like, I thought I was being pretty subtle about things.
I think you were being exceptionally subtle. I was kind of not wanting to step forward and be like, oh, here's what's going on. Because I was enjoying the rollout of the mystery.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I wanted to see, like, Rob was like, okay, what's going to happen next? Like, because my character was very much of the mind frame of, like, okay, I kind of got a clue of where this is leading to, but we need to find all of the information before we jump to a conclusion.
Yep.
You know, let's get all the facts.
But we knew Meridia was involved, so probably undead or necromancy of some sort.
Right.
You've got people going missing a little bit at a time for over a course of about a month or so, to the point where the city was fringing on a state of panic. They were talking about instituting a curfew.
Yes.
The guards were trying to usher people off the streets after dark. So some of the people were doing investigations about... there was a wanted poster.
Yes.
Was the third piece.
Two, but yes.
Two wanted posters, specifically. But one of them was for an ex-Thieves Guild member who was muscle for the Thieves Guild, named Yorda Foe Crusher.
Yes.
And somebody put together... It was Rhaegar. Put together the Nord warrior.
Of all people.
They kind of had this powwow of like, okay, guys, what do we think is going on? Is it necromancers or what's going on? And he just kind of blurts out, you know what? I think it's vampires in the sewers.
It's 100%. He was the dude slapping his hand on the board covered in sticky notes and string and went, vampires in the sewers. And we're all like, what? And he's like, just look at it all.
And then he took 5 minutes and, like, conspiracy theory connected everything, and 90% of what came out of his mouth was 100% correct what I had written as plot.
Yep.
And so I took the move then of basically saying, you're correct. I'm going to confirm you're correct, because we only play once a month, and I don't want you guys faffing around for another 5 game sessions playing guesswork and trying to figure out if this is a red herring or not.
Right.
You've got it. This is what's going on, so you can follow up on that and we can get some action.
Yeah.
And you did. And it was great.
Yep. It's the it's true.
Yes.
Factor of any mini series. You know, it's when they figure it out and then they go do. You know, and that's the turn point that you want. You don't want your players to constantly feel like, oh, is it this, or is it this, or is it this?
Because I've seen way too many of those turn into these blown-out conspiracy theories, you know, where all it takes is simple addition of 2 + 2 + 2 to put the plot together, but somebody starts doing calculus, and you fool yourself into thinking that calculus is necessary, and you're like, oh my god, you're so overthinking it. It's right in front of you. Please just grasp it.
Right.
So that when you guys did grasp it, I was like, you know what? that's great. Let's move on to the action part.
So it didn't work.
Two of my players are exceptionally quiet. Now, Rhaegar did snag the plot, and I thought that was great.
Yeah,
so it definitely shows he was involved in paying attention.
As a player, he was very involved. As a character, not so much.
Not so much.
But I don't think that detracted from things. It really wasn't. It's not his character style to be involved in those things.
Yeah. But like he and your wife Vicky were conspicuously absent from a lot of the actual in-character action.
She was involved in the scenes that were necessary. But again, they're both quiet characters.
They are. So I don't feel especially bad about them, and I don't feel bad about it necessarily. But like, if I could go back and redo it, I might throw in a little extra stuff to kind of pull them into the plot a little more, rather than just saying like, well, if you don't get up, and follow the plot, then that's your problem.
Yeah.
But in the breakdown, they did say they had a lot of fun. So it wouldn't
that's the
change
key.
much. So
that's
honestly,
the key.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a win all around.
But
anyway, enough patting myself on the back.
Well, you did a good job. You did a good job, and sometimes as a storyteller, you need to remind yourself later of these moments, so that when you're down, you could be like, "No, I am good, and I can keep doing this crap."
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to get to the main topic?
Yeah, we're going to be doing this for a while tonight.
All right.
I feel like this is going to push past an hour.
All right. So, one of the things that we're doing, and I think we talked maybe about it a little bit last show.
Yes.
Is for 2022, we've solicited some feedback from some of our listeners and such like that, and some of the feedback we got was about getting back to basics.
Yeah.
We talk about a lot of high concept stuff in storytelling, but not a lot of like, hey, I'm a first time storyteller. What do I do? And so, the first Monday of every month, we are going to be doing a Storyteller 101. And we're going to kind of, over the course of the year, be kind of going through the whole process of taking a game from a twinkle in your eye all the way up to how do you execute it at the table.
Exactly. Yeah, the whole feeling of it is that we sometimes need to bring it back in our own mindset. We're jumping over some basic things that our listeners need to know about because they're just starting out, and they may not even have. Maybe they've been players and they've wanted to start running a game, but they don't know where to start or even where to crack the egg at a certain level.
Yep.
So sometimes we need to bring it back a level, and we've often learned that when we do that, we learn things ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And so I think it's a great idea. I think this will be good.
The best way to learn was by teaching.
Yep. And then we are still going to keep our system spotlights as our second Wednesday, and then we'll have our third and or fourth Wednesdays of the month for other topics as they come around.
Yep, absolutely.
So
this week we're starting off Storyteller 101 with inspiration.
Yes.
And so how do you get your ideas for what to run? Like, where does it come from?
A lot of places.
I
will be going back over this multiple times tonight because the question came up both as from a lot of our a couple of our listener questions, but inspiration comes from all kinds of weird places. Like, for me, I've had it come from conversations with people, from labels on bottles, songs, bad situations, like bad games, bad movies.
Yeah.
Like, where I look at something, I'm just like, God, this has great lore, but why this? Why? Why did they do it that direction or whatever?
Yep.
So inspiration can come from a lot of different places, but at the same time, it can cause a lot of fear.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you don't necessarily know if you should start that way.
Right.
And so I think some people feel more comfortable going with the pre-generated stuff, pre-generated adventures of stuff, versus going full 100% creating your own adventure in your own world. And I think that change between, and decision is an important thing to do. Is it so bad to start or even, run a pre-generated adventure?
No. In fact, I actually think it's a very good thing.
I started out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us did. I actually, believe it or not, I was just researching the some stuff for the show today. I was watching a video by Seth Skorkowski, literally about this topic, about using modules and adventures. And that was kind of one of the points he brought up, is that a lot of newer players don't know how to run the game. And so having a pre-generated adventure kind of acts a bit like an instruction manual. It kind of gives you like guide rails to kind of stay on, see how an adventure should flow and such like that, and it allows you to take your mind off of a lot of the little minutia of having to write it and having to figure out what happens in it, because it's already done for you. You can then just concentrate on running it, concentrate on getting the rules correct and such like that, and give everybody a good time.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and I'll flat out say it, is a lot of times you'll run a pre-generated adventure and you won't like it at all. You'll get involved in it and you'll feel like it is 100% on rails and cramming the players through it step by step by step. And that's teaching you what you are willing to accept and what you aren't. And I think that's one of the best parts about playing a pre-generated adventure, is that you discover more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And about what you're willing to accept. Also, you discover, based on the writer of that adventure, where it got crafted, whether or not it's worth it. Because sometimes, and I've seen this before, where you get into a lot of the D&D adventures, and there's not a lot of flavor. It's a lot of data.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to kind of flavor it, and they expect that.
Here's a room, there's goblins in it. Here's another room, there's a spike trap in it, but 100 gold. Here's another room, there's a dragon in it.
Right.
That's the adventure. You're like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or here's a town with a bunch of people in it. Here are the plot hooks to get the players to go up to the old keep that has been abandoned and discover that the monster that's in the keep is actually the ghost of the old keeper there, who died by mysterious reasons. Okay, so is it a go kill the ghost? Is it a go... Don't know. That's the adventure, and you're like... Okay, like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, is he angry at the players for coming in there? I don't know, is he? And you're like, oh, geez. But at the same time, they're expecting you to kind of fill in the gaps, and they give you all the stats and everything else that's going on with that. But other ones will give you, like, a freaking choose-your-own-adventure book where it gives you, like, 9 different options for everything, and it's all spelled out in high detail. And... those are always intriguing for me. Like, that's kind of where I started with Robotech, was that the first game that I ran was Ghost Ship, which was a very stock adventure about a group of players going out to a quote-unquote derelict ship and scanning for it, and then finding out it wasn't derelict. And getting inside and finding out that it's active, and that they've basically been using it as like a covert base to go get other things, while the rest of the fleet isn't there because they're not done with the war, kind of a thing. Right. And so they're just running silent and stealthy and picking off people as they can. And you find out, that there are people to be, rescued in it. And you find information, and it turns into a rescue mission. But it's given, every single place in it is basically once you're in the ship, there is very little rules or very little direction. It's just, here's what's going on within the space, like in the cargo bay. Here's who's there. Here's the captain and his motivations, and his first officer and his motivations. Here's what the Zentradi will do if they see you. How they'll react. Here's how the systems react to each other. So if you do this, this will happen.
Sure.
But that's it. There's no, like, if-then for the players. The players can just do whatever they need to do. But they also know how long they have, what the clock is on the outside, what the hard points are for change, so that these hard moves that the ship has, and or your own rescue system that's outside waiting for you to return to take you back to base, what they're going to do at certain times. So those are the hard moves that are going to happen. Right.
Hard moves, by the way, are a mechanic from Powered by the Apocalypse system, and it's basically when you you make that move that like the players don't necessarily instigate, but they also cannot change. Like they're a distinct point in time when there's an inciting incident that changes things.
Yeah. The Death Star destroying Alderaan.
Hard move.
Hard move.
Nothing anyone in nothing any PC could have done about that. They were like, boom, it's gone.
Yep. And it's those types of things where you're hesitant to do those. And we end up talking about those a little bit in future episodes. But getting that concept and holding that in your mind of what a hard move is kind of important because we're going to bring it back up a few times.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that I think there's something to be said about the pre-gens and then using those to kind of either step into your own homebrew
or heck, even using them as inspiration for yourself.
Oh, 100%.
That's kind of where this whole discussion is going. Is where do you get the inspiration to make your own stuff? And dead honest, like modules are a great place to do that because you may read the thing and say like, okay, this is trash. But the layout of this keep is solid gold, or this one or two NPCs over here is great, or I really liked the motivation this NPC had. I'm going to use that character
or
motivation.
I love the name.
Yeah.
You know? Or even taking smaller adventures and plugging them into your existing plot because they work.
Yes.
You know,
exactly.
There's so many times where I've grabbed other encounters because they just work really well and they were written exceptionally well. Why not just steal them straight out, you know?
Yeah, whole cloth, flipped them.
You know, programmers have been doing that for decades now. Just going online to GitHub and being like, hey, I need a little bit of code.
Yeah, so I think rule number one, first off, in the whole discussion about finding your inspiration for your first game is like, don't feel bad about ripping stuff off whole cloth.
No, don't.
We do it all the time.
Yep.
It's great. Sometimes you're not even subtle about it.
No.
What was the name of that ship captain you had in 7th for a while? Louis Vampa.
That's right.
Who's the name of the ship captain in Count of Monte Cristo?
Louis
Vampa.
But and again, that was because I wanted a good NPC and I felt that he was everyone could identify with him.
Yep.
And if you couldn't, I could tell you the clip to go watch, and you could watch it and be like, that's him.
He didn't even change his appearance or anything like
no
that.
Tone,
literally,
no nothing.
Like,
you knew what to expect.
This is Vampa, and we were like, cool. He's our favorite NPC now. We've all adopted him.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Padre Anguisse was more favoritized than even Louis, but
well, okay,
but
fair
Louis
enough.
was an important thing. But I brought him into 7th. I brought him into my D&D game. As a character as well. So, like, he is my Final Fantasy Sid.
Yes. Yes.
You know? But it's those types of things because he inspires me to have specific ideas about himself, his crew, his ship, what their purpose is.
Yeah.
And it's very clean then to extend that to my players. Like, you kind of know what to expect out of this guy.
Exactly. But it's not immersion breaking for any of us to be like, this is Louis Vampa from the movie, you know?
Yeah.
Because he fits so well in that setting that you're like, it almost draws you deeper in because now we've got a very rich NPC that we've literally watched on the silver screen.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So yeah, for all you first time storytellers out there, like, do not feel bad about just putting a character in like that. You know,
or running a pre-gen,
or running a pre-gen,
Yep.
or taking the plot of a movie and just doing it.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
So where do we get our inspiration from? We touched on a little bit here.
I mean, we could talk about it, but I feel that there are like levels when you get to your inspiration of what you're kind of grabbing. So, you know, you might grab it from music, you might grab it from books, seeing something like that. Sometimes it's just a piece of text.
Yeah.
Like a line in a song that triggers a whole idea behind it.
I can give you an example of that
Okay.
off the top of my head. So, back in the day, there was, and there's a version 3.5 of D&D. There was a prestige class in one of the Splat books that, Splat books being the expansion books.
Right.
That was like you grafted a demon to yourself, basically, and like gained a bunch of like demonic powers off of it. Basically, started slowly transmuting you into a demon, sort of thing. And I thought that was a cool concept. And I was listening to Disturbed, Down with the Sickness, and there's this line in there: "The world is a scary place now that you've woken up the demon in me." And I was slightly intrigued by that at first, but listening to that line, looking at my own reflection when suddenly it changes, violently it changes. And I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden I started getting this great idea for this character that was part of a cult that worshipped all this evil stuff. And he learned a lot of like esoteric, arcane, evil knowledge from them, but had a change of heart and decided the rabbit hole was too deep for him and he wanted to get out.
Right.
But the cult decided, of course, you don't just leave. You know too much, we have to kill you. And so he goes on this survival mission of like, I'm going to use all this evil knowledge that I picked up in the cult and turn it against you. And so he summons a demon and pacts with it, binds with it, so that he can more effectively hunt down the cult that taught him how to do it in the first place.
Okay.
So
like
there's a character with a plot attached to him.
Yep. One of the ones that triggered for me that was a lyric that I couldn't instantaneously recall right now is and pardon me, my brain's terrible with names and with songs. But the line basically is, and it's just one little section, and I sweep the streets that I used to own.
Okay.
And I heard that, and my brain was thinking, is this a fallen king? No. This is larger than that, even. And so I heard it in my mind as, this is a god.
Oh.
Who is now cleaning up after someone else because they've been bumped that far down the power scale.
That is some interesting implications.
Right. And so what does that, putting that person at that point, like, they've accepted where they are. But that doesn't make them powerless because they have knowledge.
Yeah, okay.
So when I heard that in my head, I was like, who are they saying this to? That was my inspiration for the story. Was that it was a god who was telling the story to someone else in a sad way. And you're like, wait a second. Like, maybe they don't recognize they're a god.
Yeah.
But again, a god who is now cleaning up after someone else has a very different look at the world than you do.
Sure.
So,
but the thing is though, you get that idea and then you start asking why.
Yep.
Like, okay, cool, this is guy like turning into a demon, like, or this is God sweeping these streets. Why?
Yeah.
What put them there?
Right.
Why are they in this situation doing this thing right now? Maybe there's a cult, or maybe they got demoted as a god. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Why? What happened?
Yep.
You know? And then just keep asking why, and you'll be surprised what sort of stories you can just build out of just trying to figure out what that little glimmer of a character or a line or a situation put you in. And then just come up with answers for it. You know? And they don't have to be the right answers. They don't have to be the final answers.
Yeah.
But you'll find your from one little grain of inspiration, you can start building out a lot of really great stuff like that from all sorts of different sources.
Yeah. And even if your answer is, I don't know most of the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to. And I think that's where other parts come into it. But, I mean, and that's one aspect. I would definitely think that there's also those times when we've looked at IPs as a whole and said, like you did for Elder Scrolls, you're like, I am stealing this whole cloth and doing my own crap with it. That's fun. Because now you have lore that's already out there. You have names that are already out there. You have a world, you have maps. Sometimes the IP is huge. Like Elder Scrolls is a huge IP. There's tons of crap out there. For it. Sometimes it's not as big as that, and the lore is emergent based upon, like, Dark Souls is big, and the lore is very emergent because as games come out, more lore is coming out about the world.
Yes.
And you have one YouTuber that you watch who literally, like, as soon as a trailer comes out, you're like, and we'll be getting 2.5 hours worth of lore out of this guy.
Body video, yes.
Yeah. So, but that's the kind of thing, is that you look forward to those things, and because of that, that gives you access to something larger.
Absolutely.
And then, those kinds of things can then say, okay, I'm only going to talk about an aspect of this world, one small chunk of this world. And focus down on that. And I think regardless of where you're grabbing your idea from, whether it's something you grabbed, from a song, a book, or something, or you're grabbing an IP, or you're literally whole cloth, or you're expanding on an existing story, you need to know what about it excites you.
Yes.
What keeps you motivated? What pulled you into it in the first place?
And run stuff that excites you.
Yeah.
If you come up with an idea and you're like, yeah, I guess that's okay or whatever, like, if you're not enthusiastic about it, if you're not, if that idea does not light a fire under you to go and write a bunch of stuff, like, shelve it maybe.
Yeah. Come back to it later.
Find something that does give you that fire, Like, for me, the reason I picked Elder Scrolls is because a lot of my inspiration comes from wanting to explore the empty spaces in an IP. I looked at the Elder Scrolls games, and they're wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. It's some of my favorite games in the world. But like, you can only do in those games what they've programmed. You can only explore what they've added to the game.
Yeah.
What if you could go anywhere?
Yeah.
What if you could truly chat up the NPCs in more than what their dialogue trees allow for you? And that's why I wanted to run as a tabletop game, because there's so much, as rich and as deep as a lot of those games are. There's so much empty space that could be explored if you could just be free.
Yeah.
And for me, that was that. Are there bad ideas?
I'm literally going to go with the meme. Yes and no. Yes, there are both good ideas and bad ideas, but it's okay, because even bad ideas are not bad.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Here's the thing. There's tons of bad ideas. Realistically speaking, there are tons and tons and tons of bad ideas. Far more than there are good ideas. But that's fine. That's part of the process. Is writing a draft and throwing it out, and writing another draft and throwing it out, and, trying an idea or change, your first inspiration is not going to be your final draft.
No.
By any means.
Do not do that to yourself.
Does that make it a bad idea?
No.
Maybe.
But I mean, you'll find out.
Because it needed to change to become what it is. But that's fine. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to have bad ideas. Allow yourself to say, no, that's not going to work.
And sometimes it's a bad idea right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a bad idea right now, because either you don't have what you need for it, or it isn't the right time, or it's too involved.
But jot it down.
Yep.
Put it in a notebook somewhere, in a Google Doc somewhere, and come back to it later when it is a good time.
Yep. And I would say that we've got a few of our shelved ideas here, and we'll kind of explain why they got shelved.
Right.
Or why they're currently shelved.
So yeah,
besides the obvious that we're running a game. So
you want evidence that there are bad ideas? Here's your two hosts of your Storyteller Conclave podcast, going to share some of our crappiest ideas with you.
I wouldn't say our crappiest, but definitely shelved.
Yeah, definitely shelved. Definitely shelved.
So I know you've talked about wanting to run a game based on the Division IP.
Yes. So my that's another one of those things where, like, I love the IP, but it's got some empty spaces.
You feel they could do more.
That I feel like I would like to explore, outside of the confines of a shoot 'em up looter shooter video game
in New York or DC.
Yeah,
I mean, it's literally that limited.
There's one game set in New York, one game is set in DC, and I guess there's a free to play PvP version coming out in, like, Nebraska or something like that, called Heartland or something. Yeah,
wonderful.
Not looking forward to it.
No, not our cup of tea.
But I found the idea of, like, the Strategic Homeland Division pretty fascinating. They've got a lot of really cool future tech, like drones and, like, little turrets and stuff like that. Like, so the ideas of using the skills what they call skills in the game, but basically they're these like bits of shade tech that super DARPA technology is really fascinating to me. And when we were doing our system spotlight on Savage Worlds, we were talking to somebody from the Savage Worlds unofficial Discord, and we were even discussing how we would do that in Savage Worlds, and it's basically using the powers as their skills.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have like the blast power, that's just a gun turret.
Yep.
You know, you just make them deployable and stuff like that. And you use, instead of power points, you basically use requisition points.
But why didn't you run it? Why didn't you start doing it?
So it was a phenomenal idea that I was very enthusiastic about.
Yes.
I was in the writing phase, and as I was putting together the plot, I was thinking to myself, okay, realistically, if there was a pandemic, in that unlikely event that there was a pandemic, what would it look like? And who would be our major enemies? Who would be the groups that would crop up as, like, antagonists in this post-apocalyptic world? And my answer for that was Nazi militias, white supremacist militias, and then the pandemic happened, and I was like, I don't want to play a game about a world-ending pandemic where Nazis become a huge threat.
Especially during a pandemic.
Where Nazis are a huge threat?
Enough said.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's...
Hit a little too close to home.
Especially when playing the game. We actually stopped playing Division 2. Like, the two of us did. We were playing for the longest time, and it got too much, because there were times when we'd be playing it, and it was mimicking... Some of the storyline was mimicking a little too close.
Yeah. There was definitely the gift of prophecy got tossed into them for a little bit.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a reason to shelf enough. Whether it's a trigger for you, whether it's a trigger for somebody else, whether the story is a great story and should be told, and it's something that should be rolled out with people, sometimes it's not the time.
It's not the time.
So,
I think it would have been a great game
yeah.
had a global, pandemic not happened.
Yeah. So one of my ideas that I had
Yeah.
Was for a kind of wild magic world.
Okay.
Where, and it came from, and I can't remember the original source, but I was reading a very short story that was talking about a young girl who basically fire-started a town accidentally. Like, she had no idea she had any magical abilities.
Whoopsie poopsie.
And literally just ends up starting a fire in her village, which burns the village to the ground. But her brother takes the fall.
Okay.
Because they see him controlling the flames. Because he's trying to save his sister, who's stuck in the middle of it, on fire, but she's not affected.
That lemur, he's earthbending.
Exactly. And so he ends up getting taken, and the story is his perspective of basically being magically shackled, where he can't use magic. But he's because of his exposure, or his exposure and when it happened when he was a child, he is now a teenager, and he's been enslaved this entire time to work at a mine where basically the stones that they're mining absorb magic. So he can't use magic. He's bound by shackles that stop it, and he's in a place that literally drains it from you.
Okay.
So he has, he has no hope of anyone or any way of getting out of this. But he's telling the story about his sister and wondering if she's alive.
Okay.
And if she made it out of there. Because as he goes over and over again in his mind all the events that occurred, he realizes that she got away. So my thought is that anyone in the game who wants to be a magic user has to be a sorcerer, number one.
Okay.
And that any and all other mages are all single schooled mages who are bound by that school. If you deviate at any time, you start walking down a line of corruption that eventually leads you into monsterhood.
So what didn't work with this?
There was a lot of mechanics.
Yeah.
It was changing systems that made it challenging. And I was looking at D&D. I was looking at systems where magic was a big thing in the system, and there was never a mechanic that really worked without it feeling super complicated, and I would have to write pages to explain the system.
Yeah.
And it felt like if I have to write pages to explain this, then it's too much. It'll detract from the story.
Also, yeah. I remember you telling me about this one a while ago too, and I remember my first thought is like as a potential player going like, if your magic system has a caveat in it of like you can do this thing, but it's super dangerous and permanently damages your character if you do it. Nobody's ever going to use that mechanic. Right. You might as well just not write it because players are typically very consequence adverse. And they'll just never do the thing.
Or they're risk forward and they don't care.
Yeah.
Devil without a cause kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the idea of also... and then this was before I really got into understanding some of the limitations that 7th Sea put on magic and what it did socially. Like what it meant socially for heroes. Where their limitations were much more... apparent. Like, somebody who's doing Porte, it is disgusting to watch.
Yeah.
It has an adverse reflection on everyone else, and reputation is an important stat in that game.
I do portal magic by ripping holes in the universe, and they scream and bleed.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, I take on the form of animals. But I do so by changing myself in front of everyone. Okay, that's, again, like a werewolf-style alteration, So there were times later that I was like, oh, I could see where this could go. I could see how I could do it better. But at the time, still too cumbersome.
So I had one, I've talked about a couple times, I think, here on the show, was inspired by Tron.
Yes.
I wanted the PCs to be programs inside the machine, and the world we explored to be that of the inside of a computer's architecture.
Yep.
And I got into like the initial planning phases of that, of thinking about what the plot would be like, who the PCs would be, what your goal would be, and stuff like that. And I pitched it to you and Overwatch, actually. Who does not appear to be in our live chat tonight. But
I think he is. He's out there somewhere.
Wave if you're alive, Overwatch. Yeah. But anywho, pitch it to you two, who both work in IT. Like deep in high-level IT.
Been buried in IT for a long time. And
you both basically pulled the Ron Swanson at the hardware store and went, we know more than you. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's not going to work, because the first time I'm going to be like, okay, there's a firewall in front of you. You're going to be like, no, okay, so it works like this, and we do this, and we do that, and we circumvent this, and we rewrite this. And I'm like, oh, okay. Did you want to fight the other programs? Like, no, that's not how this works,
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have had fun, so Overwatch is here.
And I come back and look at it and say, there are ways you could have done it where that wouldn't even have been a concern. Just because everything becomes a disguised shade of something else. I mean, effectively, how much of it is it an adaptation of contemporary life? You have cop programs, you have fences and walls and brick walls and things like that. So it all becomes an adaptation. And how far do you take the realism of I'm a fighter. If I can do this, then I should be able to swing my sword more than twice in 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes back down to, well, there's still mechanics that limit what you can and cannot do.
Right.
You've only got so many processor cycles. Sorry.
But it became apparent to me, though, that I don't know nearly as much about computers as I thought I did, and that for you guys it would be like being a doctor watching Grey's Anatomy. You'd be like, this is all wrong. This is not what a hospital's like,
Yeah.
It potentially was not going to be fun for you guys at all, so...
But it put that fear in your mind, which was enough for you to shelf it. Yeah. But, I had the anthropomorphic Kung Fu Spirit game.
You watched Kung Fu Panda one too many times.
Honestly, no. That's not where it came from.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
It came from a short story that was about a spirit embodying a animal because it needed to get something done. And so it embodied, I want to say, like, the story starts with this spirit, basically this I think it was the spirit of creativity.
Okay.
Was lost. Like he the last vessel that it was in was broken. And so it had to find something, so it found a bird. And it was like, I need you to do this for me. And the bird had like gained some sentience and went off and took care of reinvigorating the spirit again of this creativity. But what I liked about it was the concept that these animals, all of the animals that are in it, are part of a hidden society. Like, you kind of get this feeling like all doves have this innate thing. All turtles have this innate thing. And I went, oh, okay. So it's closer to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where you have, like, yeah, there's all kinds of beavers out there, but these two beavers are intelligent and can talk and have been touched by a spirit. And that spirit is the spirit of water. So not only are they like sentient creatures, but they also have a power. And that all the players are going to be these adaptations, these spirits that influence them and direct them and kind of let them know what's going on in the world and how they have to help.
All right, so why didn't it happen?
Because I'd have to write a lot.
That's another one of those whole cloth creations.
100% whole cloth. And it was just like, I don't have time to write a whole cloth adventure on this and figure out a system. Now, looking back on it, there's a couple systems I could easily choose.
Okay. Just off the top of your head.
Savage Worlds was the first one that would make it really easy. The second one was Legend of the Five Rings.
Okay, great.
Just
yeah,
literally,
I could see Legend of the Five Rings. Yeah,
literally drop this idea inside Legend of the Five Rings.
Okay, I could see it.
Which I think could work just as well. The other thing that kind of tipped me is, and I wrote on top of this idea, was you playing Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I like some of the aspects of storytelling that are in that, and I wanted to study them a little bit more, and I was like, this would be a different way to play the game completely.
That could have been cool. Could have been cool.
You know. So.
So I had one more. Was X-Crawl.
Okay.
Was a little known expansion book for 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons back when they dropped the open gaming license in 3rd edition on the world, and basically invited a lot of third-party people to write books that use the D20 Dungeons and Dragons rule set, and X-Crawl was one of those. And it was... I grew up watching American Gladiators. Okay. And for those of you who may have never seen the show, it was basically a super hyped up obstacle course show. Where you'd have male and female competitors both, but the obstacle courses were like ridiculous. And there were a number of gladiators. We're basically just these like bodybuilders and athletes. Again, both men and women. And they had like fancy names like Titan and Goddess and Chaos, Laser and Wolfman,
Valkyrie.
Yeah. And they were essentially in place to serve as opponents for the American Gladiators, for the contestants. And so like you might have to like, wrestle one of them and try to push them out of a ring, or swing from different elevated rings to get from one side of a thing to another. One of the gladiators would come out and try to like literally swing from the things, wrap their legs around you, and anchor you down so you would just like fall off of the obstacle course.
Right. I also remember like the big challenge, which was like you had them shooting stuff.
They had a pneumatic tennis ball cannon.
Right. Yeah. And then you had various positions and weapons to fire back to hit a target.
Yeah, and it was like the dunk tank, where you don't hit the person, you hit the target next to the person, but if you do, there was like a big like shoot of air. Oh,
Yep,
sorry.
sorry.
Shoot of air that kind of came up out of it. Basically,
and
said,
disabled
like,
them.
hit. Yes.
Yeah, disabled their weapon.
It
at
was
that point.
great. It was such great fun. It was corny as hell, but it was
exceptionally
great.
corny.
And so I grew up watching that show. So then when this book X-Crawl comes out, it's basically the Extreme Dungeon Crawling League, X-Crawl. And, like, just the moment I saw the cover of it, I just imagined, like, a paladin whose shield is, like, the Pepsi logo because he's sponsored, you know, and he's got, like a NASCAR driver. He's just covered in sponsor logos all over his shining armor. And, you know, you go into this dungeon that's specifically laid out by a famous dungeon designer and who's known for his traps. And yes, he holds aloft his holy avenger, and the crowd goes wild, and let's get ready to crawl. Ba, 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 you know, starts playing, and like I was gonna do all the lights and the music and the everything for it. I was gonna paint the miniatures with all the little logos all over them, and set up the dungeons with just like a real like this was thrown together out of plywood and duct tape, sort of look to it, like American Gladiators had,
Right.
I just never got around to it.
Too much?
It always sounded fun in my head, but never as much fun as running a serious campaign of something else.
See, now, I would say this. That sounds like a fantastic one-shot.
Yes, I think it sounds like a fantastic one-shot.
Or a convention game.
Yes.
I think that's a great idea, and because it doesn't require a lot, and the players can get right into it and have fun with it. And sometimes that's what those things are. I mean, we've belabored this point. We own this show, so we're going to keep going. And we know it's almost we're coming up to an hour, and we still haven't gotten to some other meaty parts of this. But the truth is that there are tons of ideas that we have. Like, we have a lot more than that on this list, but we wanted to at least get a few of them out.
Yeah.
So
you could kind of hear what makes us tick and stuff like that.
Now, when we talk about things that come from some kind of a source, the question is how do you focus on that source material? Like, what do you take from it? And I think when you're doing something like an IP, you need to make sure that you're getting the feel of that IP.
Yes.
You're trying to pull it, whether it's a struggle that you're trying to pull out of it, or the general tone that comes over it. I mean, if I'm gonna grab the IP of Dark Souls, it needs to feel like there's despair, right?
Yeah.
Even if I'm not playing the Dark Souls world, but I want that tone. I want to keep that energy of that death is an inevitable thing, but not for you.
Death is an inevitable thing. The world itself is slumping towards its grave.
Yeah.
If at any point you're running a Dark Souls game and I say to myself, "Wow, this world feels really alive," you are doing something wrong.
Exactly.
The whole point of Dark Souls is cycles and the ends of cycles and what we do with those endings.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to play a My Little Pony game in that world.
Yeah.
That's not going to work out.
And a lot of people think it's about the violence, and it's not.
Right.
It's not. Dark Souls is not about the violence and the bloodshed and the killing and stuff like that. It is an examination of cycles and letting go at the end of a cycle. It's
not
letting go.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that?
Yep.
You know?
But, like, one of the examples you've got in here is Star Trek. And Star Trek is about discovery and exploration and, you know, humanitarian ideals and hope in general. But that doesn't mean that in each one of the stories feels a little different. And sometimes things feel way off. Like a lot of people, like you had made a note that the J.J. Abrams movie felt off or betray of the Star Trek system.
Yeah, so...
Or source, I should say.
For me, like... This is going to sound really hoity-toity. But
I don't think so.
But stay with me here. When you're getting inspiration from an IP, if you're going to run an IP, like an actual one, you know, like Star Trek or something like that, you want to find the soul of that IP. And that sounds super deep, but like we were kind of talking with the Dark Souls thing, is like the whole theme behind it is the ending of cycles and stuff like that.
Right.
And so if you're going to run any IP, you have to find that one thing that is the thing that the IP is about. So what is Star Trek about?
Right.
It's about hope. It's about exploration. It's about wonder at the universe before us. And a lot of the original show, the Next Generation, stuff like that, is about examining the human condition through these extraordinary circumstances that the crew comes about out in the universe and stuff like that.
How is a human Klingon thriving and living with both sides of him?
Exactly.
You know,
and what weird societies that have, to us, backwards ways of thinking, and how can we talk to these societies, which are really us,
right,
about these things and come to some sort of an understanding. Two words I would not use to describe Star Trek are grimdark.
No.
Star Trek is not a grimdark setting at all. It's very bright. It's very hopeful.
Yeah.
And so, for me, one of my initial ideas, and this was, I will admit, a bad idea, is, it always kind of bothered me in Star Trek that, the Klingons were described as these killing machines that were just bred for war, and, when you're 5 years old, your mom makes you fist fight her for your morning cereal, you know?
Right, they eat glass and metal.
Yeah, it's of these just, it should never... A Starfleet human should never, ever, ever be able to fist fight a Klingon and win. 10 Starfleet humans might be able to pile up on a Klingon and win with concentrated fire.
Sure.
And good coordination.
Yep.
And so, for a hot second, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to do Star Trek, but, realistic? Make the Klingons the killing machines that they are, and blah, 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 and really take things to their logical extremes the way that they're talked about.
Right.
But not necessarily implemented for either budget or story reasons. But I'm kind of glad I didn't. Because killing machines they don't have a place in the Star Trek universe. The Klingons are violent warmongers, absolutely, but they're about as violent as they need to be for that theme, for that setting, for that.
They have their violent moments.
Yeah, and certainly by all means, when the option comes up, they choose violence.
Yeah,
by all means, but if you were to run Klingons the way that I had imagined them, it wouldn't fit the feel. It wouldn't fit the soul of Star Trek.
Right. Right. And
it wouldn't be a Trek game. It would be a cool space game, but it wouldn't be a Trek game.
And it's a matter of distilling that down and continuing to keep that feel.
Yes.
It's adding the what if, but still keeping the heart the same.
Yeah.
That soulfulness of it.
Yes. So really, if you're dipping into a source material for this, that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for the spark behind it that makes it feel like what it does. Examine what that IP holds true. What it feels like. What rule does it feel like all the writing couldn't break?
Right.
Because
so many people have examined Star Trek and said there's a lot of politics and a dark edge to the Federation at the highest levels.
Sure.
Because they're doing nefarious things to keep everything in order. Because they can't let it fall apart. They have to defend humanity at the beginning of all things. And the answer is yes, but that's still an examination of the human condition. That fear is still the truth behind all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And as long as you keep that in focus, then it makes sense. Then the story can make sense and continue. And continue to make sense that that's the heart and soul of the story. I think the other part of that is that once you have a story, I think the hardest part is making sure you don't turn it into a novel.
Yeah.
I think before we get into the whole concept of player agency, the one thing that I did, and I'm glad you put it in here beforehand, is don't make plans. Have ideas, have an idea of events and such, but like a good bottle of NyQuil, don't make plans.
Yeah. Your inspiration is a great starting point. It's going to give you a lot of good places to make adventure hooks and NPCs and interesting situations for your players to get into
and reasons.
But if your inspiration is starting to lead you to think like the players will do this,
or I want the players to do what
they will react this way, and then they will go here, and then they will do. You're writing a book, no plot is going to survive contact with your players.
So one of the best things that I can say from the beginning is don't make plans for your players to follow. That's not going to work out. Treat it like little kids in a sandbox. Literally, you plop them down in the sandbox, they're going to play with the sand.
Kids don't need plans to play in the sandbox.
They don't. They need you hand them a bucket
and a shovel.
You give them a little cup of water, suddenly the world just got huge.
Yep.
Now shit can happen. And that's the kind of thing that's the truth of role-playing, is that you will always underestimate your players, and you will always overestimate what you think they know about your plot.
Yep.
You'll go both directions on it every time. I do it every time, and I have to roll myself back every time.
And that is why I confirmed for my players that you have guessed the plot correctly, because...
Yeah, congratulations,
the moment
Monty.
that happens, oh wow.
Yeah. So then the next thing to talk about, realistically, and this is just the beginning of this discussion that we talked about, is agency.
Yeah. So this is where you're starting to take your inspiration and move it into like, okay, how is this going to become a game?
Yeah. How do I step away from novelizing this idea?
and so it's not only agency, but make sure your players have something to do. Okay, so it's one thing to be like, okay, well this world exists like this, and this kingdom is doing this, and this kingdom is doing that, and blah blah blah. Great. What do the players do? Where will they be? Who will they be? Where do they fit into the story, and how will they have agency within it?
Right. Like, it's great if you start them out in a small town where they're all just effectively normal people, and then something happens.
Yeah.
Like, great. Something happens. Why do they care? And what is it that they're supposed to do with that something happens? And
again, this is getting like into the beginning of next month's discussion.
Right.
So this is actually putting things into practice, but it's a good place to look at from your inspiration point of making sure that like, okay, when we start this game, sure, we're running Elder Scrolls. That's huge. What do the players do? Okay, well, mine are members of the Fighters Guild or Mages Guild. They will
jobs.
be doing various adventurer things that their guilds will assign them, at least at first.
Yep.
Until they get their own agency, their own ideas, and they go in their own directions and such like that.
Right.
That's a thing that you can do.
Yeah. The initial hook is always a great idea of having why your players are in that space doing something. A lot of adventures start out with the hook being, you were hired and you're doing X.
And that's great.
It's great.
It works great because it gives you a definite direction.
Yeah, and the other thing is that as a storyteller, you don't have to always worry about knowing why. Your players will help you understand why.
Yeah.
Well, did you come here for the money? No. I owed the priest a favor. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Sounds great.
Cashing in a favor. Cool.
Yep,
Sounds
they
good.
cashed in a favor, and you're now doing this job. Well, after that, it's up to them why they're together.
Yeah.
And they know they have to work together. It's you're all in a cell on a ship. Great. How many games have started out that way in the digital realm?
Literally every Elder Scrolls game.
Pretty much. So that concept spans, and there's nothing wrong with using those types of stories, but you always have to remember that you have to have a reason why they're there, and what's that first thing they're doing. So,
and if you can't answer that after you come up with your idea, you need to go back to the drawing board.
Yep. Take a step back.
Find a place where your players fit, and how your players can affect the world around them, that they have agency in it.
That's right. And when we talked about hard moves, this isn't railroading. A hard move is not railroading. We're not removing the player's agency.
Right.
We're talking about a world-changed event.
Yeah, so you're not scripting or railroading anything if you're hard moving. it's just an inciting incident, and the difference between doing that and like railroading them or like writing a book, essentially, you know, where you don't have agency, is that you're going to step back once that incident happens. Once you make that hard move, you remove your hands from it,
Right.
and you let the players react.
Yeah, you've got your stories where you start out in a cage on a boat, and they're like, as soon as we get you to, Corinth, you will all be part of the master's studies because you're unique. Mm-hmm. And then an attack happens on the ship, and you're tossed out of your cells, and the ship is on fire. And suddenly, when you make it to deck, you realize there's a kraken tearing the ship apart.
That's a hard move.
That's the hard move right there.
But what you don't do then is continue to tell the players, okay, you do this and you do that,
right,
and then you end up here.
Right. It's just you wash up on shore and all awake.
Mm-hmm.
And the story continues. Now, you know somebody was taking you somewhere, and now you're somewhere else. Like, you have a bit of story, and you can continue with your plot. But the hard move is the ship gets destroyed and you end up on shore.
Right.
You're not giving them the chance to fight the Kraken because it's not there to be fought.
Sure. It's part of the hard move. It just happens.
Right.
But I think a lot more of that discussion though is for next month.
Yep.
Next month and moving forward. So
all right.
We had some questions though.
Yeah. Let's spend a half an hour on these questions.
Oh Jesus. All right. So Ogdenme asks, how often do you pull your ideas out of context or out of genre to use as a basis for developing a story? All the damn time.
All day long.
Let me tell you, pulling an idea or out of context or genre is one of the best gifts you can have.
It's also one of the best gifts you can give your players when they figure it out.
Yeah. So, for instance, I don't know if I'm going to go into my whole the thing that I jotted down here. It's a bit of a long explanation.
It is
long. We're already running late.
Yeah, we'll probably get into it within the next few shows.
But for instance, like in my game, I introduced a couple of wizards from the Sigic Order.
Yeah.
Who were looking at what happened to the Crown of Poppies.
The end item of the previous act.
The end of the previous act was this magical artifact they allowed you to like mind control people and stuff. It was really wild.
Yeah.
So these two guys came by basically asking about like, hey, we read your report and we were going to basically come and collect this artifact from you, but you say you don't have it. It's been destroyed.
How'd you do that?
We wanted to ask some questions about that. So there was two out of context things that I pulled, and I think everybody got both of them.
Yep.
But they fit so perfectly with the story that they got a chuckle. Mm-hmm. First off, these guys said that they their job as the Sigic Order is to secure, contain, and protect.
Yep.
The thing. So that's lifted dead from the SCP.
Yep.
SCP Foundation.
Yep.
But also I named the investigators Joseph Fridas and William Gagnon.
Yeah.
Gagnon.
Yeah.
And it's Joe Friday and Bill Gannon from Dragnet.
Yes, which I thought was fantastic.
And I described them completely the way that they were, like lifted completely out of context. Just they're the dudes from Dragnet. Mm-hmm. Period. In wizard robes.
Yep. And I've grabbed fables and just reused them. Like I'll find old, fables that people necessarily haven't heard of, and just change them up. Like, oh, this is the Old Man and the Bridge Troll tale, but I'm going to be telling it in my current game, which has nothing to do with either of those things. I'm basically re-representing them as new people.
Yeah, sure.
And it works. It's amazing how that works.
And the thing is, when you remove something from context, like they talk about how there's only like 7 different types of stories, and stuff like that. So when you remove something from context and put it into your game, unless you like keep all the names and all the events and use a lot of them, your players probably aren't going to notice.
Right.
So you can really lift a lot of stuff from and new storytellers. This one's for you since this is a 101. Mm-hmm. Do it. Lift things whole cloth. Steal.
That's right.
Steal with reckless abandon. You're not publishing this. You don't need to worry about copyright law. Yeah. Your reputation is not on the line.
Yeah, I mean, if you literally want to rewrite Red Riding Hood in space, where your players are Red Riding Hood delivering cargo across the galaxy and have to go through the Wolf Pack's territory,
Do it.
And then the wolf pack actually has taken over the facility that they're going to be dropping cargo at, and have hid people. Has hid the CEO of that operations center, and you have to rescue them and get this old.
My Deep Space
bear.
7.
Yeah.
What big phasers you have.
Exactly. Like those are a lot of fighters you have in the hangar bay there. Like I really got to defend this area. You're in the middle of nowhere. Why?
Yeah.
So. Those kinds of things, you can totally steal whole cloth, and it's fun when you do stuff like that because in the back of your head, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you can just keep jumping with it. So, all right, the Mad Elf asks, when you're stumped for ideas, plot development, what are some go-to resources to light the fire?
So my you are my go-to.
I agree. We bounce a lot off each other.
There have been several post-podcast discussions of, hey, do you mind if I stick around for a little bit and bounce some things off you?
Yep.
And we both have that level of respect where we're not going to grab metagame knowledge. And
right.
Most of us, it's so out of context and we don't remember it by the time the next game rolls around anyways. And neither of us are there to quote-unquote win the other person's game. So even if we did remember, we're there for the journey, not for the ending.
I completely agree.
But yeah, no, you're my source of I need to work something out
and
for inspiration.
It's nice to have those moments because sometimes even having somebody who's not involved in gaming and asking them a question of like, so this is what's going on, and then they're like, well, did you ever think about this? Like I did that with Wendy and Steve. Like brought up my game because I was kind of hitting a point. I'm like, well, I kind of want to do something fun with this, and it was Wendy who came up with the idea for like, well, why don't they have doppelgangers? Like people who've been them. And I'm like,
yeah.
That totally makes sense because people would have heard about this and then somebody's going to capitalize on that and try and make money on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Got it. That's going to be something that'll be in there.
Somebody's going to try to capitalize on it and make money.
I mean,
that's how I heard, like, that's how you disprove flat earthers is with capitalism.
No.
It's because have you ever seen I've been to the edge of the world and all I got is this stupid t-shirt?
No.
Nope. Well, capitalism hasn't tried to exploit the edge of the world yet, so it must not exist.
That's fair. The other one for me is puns. Puns will come out of nowhere. Somebody will mishear something, or you'll read something like Vicky was reading to me off the back of a bottle and misread something as juniper pines. And I went, oh, that sounds like a great name for a druid.
Yeah.
She's a real sweet gal,
and like over the next 5 minutes, you came up with a whole backstory for her and stuff. That was great, yeah.
And like a history of what was going on and why she needed help. And it was like, that didn't take much at all for my brain to go jump.
Yeah, exactly. Just from misreading something off the back of a bottle.
Yeah, so it's fun sometimes to I remember at a time there was when Snapple was notorious for the underlid quotes and things.
Oh, yeah.
There was a, like, pop one of those off, read it, and see if you could come up with something. And sure enough, sometimes you'd come up with some neat ideas.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so Knox in the Box asks, when starting a story, which is more important, finding your own storytelling style or your players? What do you feel the best way to find a style is?
Well, I think in our discussion that we had before the show was, you don't find your style. The style finds you.
Style finds you.
You'll discover that you have a style.
yeah, absolutely. Style works itself out, so I don't think there's not really much you can do to discover your style other than just give it time and storytell and find what you tend to like doing, find what game systems jive with you well, find what game systems frustrate you and you stray away from.
Yeah,
find what types of players end up at your tables over the years.
That's what I was going to say, is that a lot of times you'll end up with one player group that likes certain things, and then a portion of that group with some other individuals will like a different thing, and then a whole other group will be for something else, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
like that happens all the time.
Yeah, but as far as you're finding your player styles, yeah, curating your players is absolutely something you do and does happen all the time. The longer you are a storyteller, the more you are going to find that, like, okay, well, I'm going to run a game. Man, I really need Rob at my table for this game.
Yep.
And I'm definitely going to need Sean. I'm going to need Vicky. Steve loves this style game too, so I'm going to invite him. That's 4.
Right.
Do I go one more? Yeah,
Yeah.
And you start curating groups of people like that, and then you're like, well, I'm gonna run a heavy combat game. I know Sean loves those, so definitely gonna have him. But
Yeah. Or I'm gonna run this setting, and these people love this setting, and
sometimes it's a hit or miss. Sometimes you invite someone there, and they're just like, yeah, I'm not driving with this.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
That's up to them. So, Overwatch asks, where is an unlikely place you sometimes get inspiration from? Conversely, do you have a regular go-to for inspiration and story ideas? Cartoons and history for me.
Oh, it's cartoons always for you, man.
Cartoons is a great way. Like, I will find so many beautifully written stories in cartoons and hidden gems of craziness that spark off ideas for me.
It's honestly one of your fascinating hobbies to me because I tend to watch just like a lot of like video game Let's Plays and stuff like that in my free time and whatnot. But like you'll come to me and you're like, okay, so I shotgunned this whole thing of like David the Gnome, and I'm like, okay, did you learn how to spell and do your basic addition? And you're like, no, the character development was amazing. The plot line went like this, and I was like, you pulled all that from a children's? Okay,
yeah,
sure, man. Like,
but I mean, and especially right now
but it's great.
Yeah, I would say in the last 15 years, we've had such a birth of beautiful artistry and storytelling that has been made easier. Like really I would say since The Simpsons, that artists have had much more access to be able to create, and production houses have been much more accepting of various stories, that it presents some beautiful things. We've had, like, I mean, Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Adventure Time. People will go into exceptionally long stories about the lore that sits behind these individual character plot lines and histories that are so deep because of so many little things that come out in those stories.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's wonderful to see that stuff, but there's so much storytelling going on that you can miss. And so I look back at these things and I see the art and the love that's been put into it, that storytellers from one show will incorporate things into another show, just hidden in the background. And like, you'll know about that and you'll watch within that show a bit of the other show's lore coming out. Yeah. And if you're there for it, it's great and it's amazing, and you're like, that shows the love for each other there, but at the same time you're like, these people are telling beautiful stories.
Yeah. And
for me, that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
for me, my unlikely source of inspiration is actually game rules. You wouldn't think that looking at a bunch of roll these dice with these numbers would be inspirational, but well, like for instance, reading through Savage World rules, and like they've got a whole section on how to do chases, and just reading those rules, it starts making me think, oh, what would be cool situations that I could use these in, and they start listening. Well, if the race is on foot, and I'm like, oh, foot chase through an urban city, and like chasing after a thief that stole something, and like, okay, the hazards come up with it's like a fruit cart or like a group of people that you have to like kind of push through, and like movie scenes start playing out in my head just because I'm reading these rules for how to represent that at the table.
I'm so glad that my cinematic mind of storytelling has ripped into you a little bit.
Yeah, because it wasn't there before.
I mean, it was. It clearly was, but now you do it more often, way more than you used to.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. I think something that we can flat out talk about is that when you start working with other storytellers and seeing other stories and playing other games, you sometimes pick up some of their styles.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a great part of this. A great part of this answer here too is other storytellers. We talk a lot about, if we had him on the show, when we were talking about space operas, was Seth Skorkowski.
Yep.
I still go back to that guy's channel a lot, and just he's got like a whole game mastering like how to, very much like our show actually, that he does on his channel, and he's a great resource. You watch a lot of How to Be a Great DM.
Yeah, How to Be a Great GM.
How to Be a Great GM, yeah.
And honestly, Guy is amazing. He is incredible. He's written books. He's written adventures. He doesn't play his own adventures.
Yeah.
But I always think it's amazing that all these resources exist, right now especially.
I'm an avid listener of the Savage Interludes podcast about the Savage Worlds game. And the inspiration for this show to begin with, Adventuring Academy with Brendan Lee Mulligan, is also another great source out there.
Yeah.
So other storytellers, just listening to other storytellers is a great inspiration.
Dale Kingsmill.
Yeah, Del Kingsmill.
Yes, amazing at pulling together
Monarch's Factory is the name of her YouTube channel.
Yeah, amazing historical pieces and lore and. Really does deep dives into things, but at the same time, sometimes we'll just go to town on an idea, a spell or a specific encounter type of thing, and it's wonderful. It's just it's inspiring to watch, and I think that's where sometimes that excitement can help you jump in a direction. Mm-hmm. So
speaking of inspiration, actually, Knox in the Box just dropped this in the live chat. He says, I want somebody to introduce the erasure dilemma of Link's Awakening in a tabletop game. That was the Game Boy Zelda game.
Yeah.
The first Game Boy Zelda game.
Yeah.
He says, but I don't know what you'd set up to have to have that there. The whole kill the problem without killing the world thing. The dilemma essentially was that, like, the whole world took place in the dream of this creature.
That's right.
And you were kind of trapped there, so you had to defeat the creature, but like, you knew that once that happened, the dream would end and the whole world would be gone.
Yeah.
And so how do you get yourself out of it without taking the entire world with you, you know? Mm-hmm. And that was a cool plot. It was a cool plot. And see, like, right there, we're talking about inspiration. As you played a video game and you thought, how would I make that plot work on the tabletop? Boom. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. You can wrap an entire campaign around that, man.
You very much could.
You can absolutely wrap an entire campaign around that. That's what we're talking about.
Just make sure that you sell all the points so the players know the concerns.
Yeah. He follows up with, makes you wonder if you're actually the good guy doing the right thing.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, no, and I think moral dilemmas like that are great things to have in a campaign setting because, you know, And I think the important thing about moral dilemmas like that in your setting is don't answer them.
Yeah.
Let the players figure it out for themselves, because what they're going to come up with is much deeper than anything you're going to hand them.
Yeah.
Kind of like I'm doing with you in my Elder Scrolls game. I've got a potentially violent Daedra, but she wants you to slaughter the bad guys, right? But then you've also followed the God of Mercy, who wants you to be chill with everybody. But who deserves mercy? Do the bad guys deserve mercy?
Yeah,
or do they deserve the sword?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to tell you the answer to that. I'm going to hand you the sword, and I'm going to let you make that decision yourself.
Yep.
And we're going to play it out at the table.
Yep. It's going to be interesting.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting. So.
All right. I think it's about
it's about
enough
time
for tonight.
It's about time.
So our next week's topic is second Wednesday of the month. So we're going to be doing our system spotlight this week. It's going to be about Fate 4th edition and Fate Accelerated,
which
so you can...
are. I was going to say we got a couple seconds here. So it's the same system, just even more cut down, and you may know Fate actually as Fudge back in the day.
Oh, if you're old enough, Fudge, yeah.
Well, because Fate was the F in Fate used to be Fudge.
Yeah, and if you've been to a game store, you may have seen those plus and minus dice. This is where those come in. So you can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. Join the discussion there. Throw us some questions. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank all of our members and listeners who are on our Discord, but also our named members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hulavu. We appreciate you helping us out every single month. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that on patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and
very
supporting
much.
us. All of our friends who sat with us at our tables over the years to give you these great stories to share with you.
And ideas.
And you, every single one of our listeners, we love you so much.
Love you very much.
Good night.
Good night.